The complete horror story. Disturbing, true, scary stories. The Watchers in the Walls. My name is Elena Rodriguez, and I'm a home health nurse in rural Oregon. I've seen death, decay, and the slow deterioration of the human body. None of it prepared me for what I encountered at the Blackwood estate. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon in October. My supervisor, Linda, had an unusual tension in her voice when she briefed me. "We need you to take over care for Judith Blackwood. She's 83, bedridden, lives alone in the old Blackwood manor on Route 9. The previous nurse quit without notice." "Why'd she quit?" I asked, already sensing something off. Linda hesitated. She didn't say, just turned in her badge and left. "You're the fourth nurse we've assigned to Mrs. Blackwood in 2 months." I should have pressed harder. I should have asked more questions. Instead, I took the assignment, loaded my medical bag, and drove 30 miles into the woods to meet my new patient. The Blackwood Manor rose from the forest like a gravestone, 3 stories of Victorian Gothic architecture, all dark wood and towering windows that seemed to watch my approach. The driveway was overgrown, and the gardens had long since surrendered to wilderness. As I parked, I counted 12 windows on the front facade alone. Every single one had curtains drawn tight. I knocked on the massive front door. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time, and the door swung inward on its own, creaking like something from a horror movie. "Mrs. Blackwood? It's Elena Rodriguez, your new nurse." The entrance hall was cavernous and dim, illuminated only by weak afternoon light filtering through gaps in the curtains. A grand staircase dominated the space, and portraits lined the walls, generations of Blackwoods, all staring down with the same cold, judgmental eyes. Upstairs came a weak voice from above. "Second floor. Master bedroom." I climbed the stairs, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood. The second-floor hallway stretched impossibly long, lined with doors on both sides. At the far end, one stood open, spilling yellow lamplight into the corridor. Judith Blackwood lay in an enormous 4-poster bed, diminished by age and illness. Her skin was paper-thin, her white hair sparse against the pillow. But her eyes were sharp, alert, and filled with something I couldn't quite identify. Fear? Resignation? "You're the new one," she said. It wasn't a question. "How long do you think you'll last?" "I'm here to help you, Mrs. Blackwood. Let me check your vitals." As I worked blood pressure, temperature, checking her medications, I became aware of a strange sensation. The feeling of being watched. I glanced around the room. Heavy curtains covered the windows. The door was open to the hallway. Nothing seemed unusual, yet the feeling persisted. "You feel them, don't you?" Mrs. Blackwood whispered. "The Watchers." "I don't know what you mean." Her bony fingers gripped my wrist with surprising strength. "They live in the walls. They've been here since this house was built in 1887. My great-grandfather knew about them. He made a deal. Let them watch, let them feed on what they see, and they'd leave the family alone. But the deal is ending. I'm the last Blackwood. And when I die—" She trailed off, her eyes darting to the walls around us. I gently extracted my wrist. "Mrs. Blackwood, you're just tired. Let me get you some water." "You think I'm senile," she said, settling back into her pillows. That's what the others thought. Until they saw them, too. I spent the next hour tending to her needs, adjusting her position, administering medications, preparing a light dinner she barely touched. All the while, that sensation of being observed grew stronger. Several times, I caught movement in my peripheral vision, shadows shifting behind the curtains, darkness pooling in corners, but when I looked directly, nothing was there. At 7 p.m., as dusk settled over the manor, Mrs. Blackwood suddenly grabbed my arm again. You need to leave before dark.
Please.
They're stronger at night. I'm required to stay until 10 p.m., I said, trying to sound reassuring. I'll be right here if you need anything. She closed her eyes, a tear sliding down her weathered cheek. Then God help you. As darkness fell, the house changed. The creaks and groans of old wood settling became something more deliberate. Footsteps in empty rooms, doors opening and closing, whispers too faint to understand but loud enough to notice. I tried to rationalize it. Old houses made noise. Wind in the eaves. Mice in the walls. But mice didn't breathe. At 8:30 p.m., while sitting in a chair beside Mrs. Blackwood's bed, I heard it clearly, a long, slow exhalation coming from inside the wall behind me. I froze, listening. Silence. Then another breath, and another, like something massive was sleeping just beyond the plaster. I stood and approached the wall, placing my hand against the faded wallpaper. It was warm, impossibly warm, as if heated from within. And beneath my palm, I felt movement, a subtle shifting like muscles flexing under skin. I yanked my hand back, heart racing. Mrs. Blackwood, I think we should call. They know you're here, she interrupted, her voice distant. They've been watching you since you arrived. Studying you. Deciding. Deciding what? Whether you're worth keeping. The lamp on the bedside table flickered. In that moment of darkness, I saw them. Faces pressed against the inside of the walls. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, visible through the wallpaper as if it had become transparent. Human faces but wrong, features too long, eyes too large, mouths too wide. And they were all staring directly at me. The light returned, and the walls were solid again. But I knew what I'd seen. What are they? I managed to whisper. Mrs. Blackwood's voice was barely audible. My great-grandfather was an architect. He built this house using plans he found in an old grimoire. The walls aren't just wood and plaster, they're a prison. Or maybe a feeding ground. The watchers exist between spaces, between walls, observing our world, but unable to enter it. Usually. The deal was they could watch, but never interact. Never touch. But deals can be broken, Miss Rodriguez. And I've been breaking it for years. I moved toward the door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. The lock clicked. I pulled the handle. It wouldn't budge. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Blackwood said, and now her voice sounded different. Younger. Stronger. But I need more time.
Just a little more time.
And they're so very hungry.
I spun around.
She was sitting up in bed, moving with an ease that contradicted her supposed frailty. Her eyes had changed too. They were completely black now, reflecting nothing. You're not dying, I realized. You're not even sick. She smiled, and it was the smile of something wearing a human face like a mask. Oh, I was dying. 30 years ago, when I made my own deal with the Watchers. They could have me when my time came, but until then, they'd keep me alive, keep me young inside this decaying shell. But the deal required payment. Every few months, I needed to provide them with someone new. Someone to watch. Someone to study. Someone to eventually consume. The walls began to pulse, breathing in rhythm with something vast and terrible. The faces returned, pressing against the wallpaper, distorting it, beginning to push through. The other nurses? I asked, backing against the locked door. They served their purpose. Some lasted longer than others. The Watchers prefer fear. It makes the experience richer for them. They feed on our terror, our desperation, our final moments of hope. Hands began emerging from the walls. Long, pale hands with too many joints, fingers that bent in impossible directions. They reached for me, dozens of them, grasping at air. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed the heavy lamp from the bedside table and threw it at the window. The glass shattered, and blessed cold air rushed in. I didn't hesitate. I ran and dove through the window. The fall from the second story should have killed me, or at least broken bones. Instead, I crashed through overgrown bushes that cushioned my landing. Pain exploded through my body, but I could move. I ran toward my car, fumbling for my keys, expecting at any moment to feel those hands grabbing at me from behind. The engine started on the first try. I floored it, tires spinning on the gravel driveway. In my rearview mirror, I saw Mrs. Blackwood standing in the broken window, still wearing that terrible smile. And behind her, the entire house seemed to writhe, every window filled with pale faces pressing against the glass. I didn't stop driving until I reached the police station in town. They listened to my story with increasing skepticism. 2 officers agreed to accompany me back to the manor, more to prove I was hysterical than because they believed me. We arrived at dawn. The Blackwood manor looked different in daylight, just an old, abandoned house, windows dark and empty. The front door hung open. Inside, we found nothing but dust and decay. The master bedroom was empty except for a bed frame and broken furniture. No Mrs. Blackwood. No sign anyone had lived there in years. This place has been abandoned since Judith Blackwood disappeared in 1994, one officer told me, consulting his notes. You couldn't have been here yesterday. It's been condemned for 3 decades. But I had been there. The scratches on my arms from the bushes proved it. The terror in my memory confirmed it. Linda called me the next day. Elena, I don't know what happened, but I need to tell you something. There is no Judith Blackwood. There never was an assignment. I never called you, but I heard your voice. I was at a conference yesterday. I didn't make any calls.
She paused.
Elena, for other nurses have reported similar experiences over the past 20 years. All describe being called to the Blackwood manor. All describe an elderly woman who isn't dying. None of them went back. Why didn't you warn me? Because the calls aren't real. The assignments aren't real. Something calls to nurses, mimics our voices, lures them to that house. We don't know what it is or how to stop it. I hung up and sat in my apartment, staring at the walls. They were normal walls, drywall, paint, nothing sinister. But sometimes, usually just before I fall asleep, I hear it. Breathing. Slow and steady, coming from inside the walls. And I know they're still watching. The watchers found me once, and I escaped. But I don't think they've forgotten. I don't think they've forgiven. And I don't think walls are enough to keep them out anymore. Last night, I saw a face pressed against the inside of my bedroom wall. Just for a moment. Just long enough to smile. They're patient, these watchers. They've waited in the walls of the Blackwood manor for over a century. They can wait a little longer for me, but not much longer.